My child, the truth has finally reached the one person who was never supposed to discover it. For so long, they believed you had already chosen a life without them. They were told that you had moved on, that your heart belonged somewhere else, and that waiting for you would only leave them broken. But now they have discovered something that has completely changed the way they see your entire separation. Because you never said the words they were told you said. Listen carefully. Because this was not simply a misunderstanding between two people who loved each other. Someone stood between you and deliberately made your person believe that the door to your heart had already closed forever. They knew exactly what your person felt for you. They knew how difficult it was for them to walk away. And they also knew that if your person believed there was even the smallest chance that you still cared, they would have come back, asked questions, and fought for what the two of you once shared. That is exactly why the lie had to sound believable. It could not be something obvious. It had to sound like information coming from someone who could be trusted. Your person was told that you were doing better without them. That you had stopped asking about them. That you were finally happy again. They were even made to believe that you had spoken about the past as if it no longer meant anything to you. And those words destroyed something inside them. Because the truth was completely different. There were nights when you still crossed their mind without warning. There were moments when they almost reached for their phone. There were times when they typed a message, stared at it for several minutes, and then deleted every word. Not because their feelings were gone. Because they believed contacting you would interfere with the new life they had been told you were building. They thought staying away was the respectful thing to do. They thought silence was what you wanted. And the person behind this lie depended on that silence. Every week that passed without contact made the story look more believable. Your person thought, if they still cared, surely they would have reached out by now. And perhaps there were moments when you were wondering exactly the same thing. That was how two people who still carried unfinished feelings were kept apart without either of them fully understanding why. But recently, one small detail stopped making sense. Someone mentioned something about you during an ordinary conversation. It was not supposed to be important. But your person immediately noticed that it contradicted the story they had been hearing for so long. They asked one question. Then another. And suddenly the person speaking became uncomfortable. Your person noticed. They could feel that something was being avoided. So this time, instead of accepting another explanation, they kept asking. What exactly did they say? When did they say it? Who heard them say it? The room became quiet. Because nobody could give them a straight answer. And that was the moment suspicion entered their mind. For the first time, they began wondering whether you had truly moved on. Or whether somebody had simply wanted them to believe that you had. They started remembering old conversations. Certain messages suddenly sounded different. Certain warnings suddenly felt calculated. They remembered being told not to contact you because you needed space. They remembered being told that you would be uncomfortable if they came back. They remembered one person repeatedly saying, "You need to accept that it is over." At the time, they thought that person was helping them heal. Now they are beginning to realize that person may have been protecting a lie. And once that realization entered their mind, they could not ignore it. Your person went back and checked something they had never thought to question before. A date. A conversation. A message that had supposedly come from you, and there was a problem. The timing did not match. The story they had been given could not possibly have happened the way they were told. That discovery shook them deeply. Because suddenly they were forced to consider a painful possibility. What if they walked away from you because of something you never actually said? What if all those months, or even years, of distance were built on somebody else's manipulation? What if you were waiting for clarity while they were grieving a future they believed you had already rejected? They became angry. But underneath that anger was something much more powerful. Regret. They started thinking about every moment they could have reached out. Every question they should have asked you directly. Every time they allowed somebody else to speak on your behalf. And they realized something devastating. They never actually heard the truth from you. They heard interpretations. They heard rumors. They heard statements beginning with, "They told me." But they never heard you say, "I don't want you anymore." That realization changed everything. Your person is no longer looking at your separation the same way. They are no longer convinced that you willingly left them behind. And the individual who helped create this distance knows that the story is beginning to collapse. Because your person confronted them. At first, they denied everything. They said your person was remembering things incorrectly. They tried changing the subject. They even suggested that reopening the past would only create more pain. But your person refused to stop. They asked one final question. Did you actually hear those words from them? Or did somebody tell you they said them? There was a long silence. And that silence answered more than any explanation could. Your person knew immediately. Something had been hidden. Then came the confession. Not the complete confession. Not yet. But enough. Enough for your person to understand that the story about you moving on had never been as certain as they were led to believe. Enough for them to realize that someone had deliberately exaggerated what they knew. And enough for your person to stand up and say something nobody in that room expected. If they never said it themselves, then I need to hear the truth from them. That means you. For the first time in a very long time, your person is considering coming directly to you instead of listening to everybody else. But there is one more piece of this story they have just discovered. And this part is worse. Because the lie about you moving on was not created simply to keep your person from contacting you. There was another reason. Another person benefited from keeping the two of you separated. And your person has just found something that may reveal exactly who started the entire story. And why they were so desperate to make sure your person never came back to you. The deeper your person looked, the more uncomfortable the truth became. Because this was never just about someone passing along the wrong information. Someone had been watching the distance grow between the two of you. And instead of correcting it, they quietly encouraged it. They knew your person was vulnerable. They knew there were still feelings for you. And they knew that one honest conversation between the two of you could destroy everything they were trying to control. So they made sure that conversation never happened. Whenever your person started missing you, this individual reminded them of the same story. They've moved on. They don't want to reopen the past. You'll only embarrass yourself if you contact them. Again and again, those words were repeated until your person stopped questioning them. But now your person knows something was wrong. And they are furious. Not only because someone lied, but because they allowed that lie to decide something their own heart had never decided. They began going back through old memories. And suddenly they remembered one moment that had never made sense. There was a time when your person almost contacted you. They had already decided what they wanted to say. They were ready to admit they still cared. But before they could send the message, someone close to them appeared with new information about you. That person claimed you were already serious about someone else. Your person believed it. And the message was never sent. Now they have discovered that there was no proof. No direct conversation with you. No confirmation. Nothing. Just words. And when your person demanded to know where that information originally came from, the answer changed 3 different times. First, they claimed a friend told them. Then they said they had heard it somewhere. Finally, they admitted they were only trying to stop your person from getting hurt. But your person immediately asked, "How were you protecting me by lying to me?" There was no answer. Because by then, the truth was becoming impossible to hide. This individual had their own reason for wanting your person to let you go. Maybe they wanted your person to choose another relationship. Maybe they believed you did not fit the future they had planned for them. Maybe they feared losing control over someone whose decisions they had influenced for years. Whatever the reason, they decided they had the right to interfere. And your person is only now realizing how much damage that interference caused. But something even more shocking happened next. Another person finally spoke up. Someone who had been around during those days. Someone who had stayed quiet because they did not want to create conflict. They looked at your person and said, "There's something you were never told." Your person froze. Because this person revealed that you had actually asked about them. Not once. More than once. You had wanted to know how they were doing. You had wondered why they disappeared. And at one point, you had even tried to send a message through someone else. But your person never received it. Imagine what that did to them. For years, they believed you were happily living as though they had never mattered. Now they were learning that you had been confused by their silence too. Your person could barely speak. Their first question was simple. Why didn't anyone tell me? The answer was painful. Because someone had decided that keeping you apart was for the best. For the best. Those words made your person lose control. They said nobody had the right to make that decision for them. Nobody had the right to decide what you felt. Nobody had the right to decide whether your love story deserved another chance. And most of all, nobody had the right to steal years from two people based on a lie. That was when the person who had kept quiet finally revealed one more detail. There was something you supposedly said that had been repeated to your person for a very long time. Something that convinced them there was absolutely no reason to return. But according to this witness, you never said those words at all. The statement had been changed. A completely different meaning had been created from something you actually said. And when your person heard what your original words really were, their entire expression changed. Because your words did not sound like someone who had moved on. They sounded like someone who was hurt. Someone who still cared. Someone who had been waiting for an explanation that never came. Your person walked away from that conversation shaken. They needed time alone. Not because they doubted the truth anymore. Because they were finally understanding what the truth meant. It meant the separation they had spent so long accepting might never have been necessary. It meant the goodbye they thought you had chosen may have never been your choice. And it meant the feelings they had tried so hard to bury were based on a story that was now falling apart. That night, they did something they had avoided for a very long time. They searched for you. They looked at your name. They stared at your picture. And all the emotions they had forced themselves to suppress came rushing back. There was love. There was anger. There was regret. But strongest of all was one question. What if they still care? Your person picked up their phone. They started writing. Then stopped. Deleted it. Started again. Because after everything they had discovered, they no longer knew how to begin. How do you explain that you stayed away because you believed a lie? How do you apologize for silence that lasted far too long? How do you tell someone that you never stopped caring when your actions made it look exactly the opposite? Your person sat there for a long time. Then something happened that changed their hesitation completely. The person who had finally exposed the lie sent them one final piece of evidence. It was old. It had been hidden for a long time. And it was connected directly to you. When your person opened it, they saw something they were never supposed to see. Something proving that you had not simply walked away. Something proving that someone had deliberately intercepted the truth before it could ever reach them. And after seeing it, your person said only one thing. I need to talk to them myself. But before they can come toward you, there is one person they intend to confront one last time. Because now they want the complete truth. Who started the lie? How long had they been planning to keep you apart? And what else did they hide that neither you nor your person has discovered yet? That final confrontation is about to expose something much bigger than either of you expected. The final confrontation happened sooner than anyone expected. Your person did not arrive looking for an argument. They arrived looking for the truth. And this time, there was nowhere left for anyone to hide. They placed the evidence down and asked one simple question. Why did you make me believe they had moved on? For several seconds, nobody answered. Then the excuses began. They said they were only trying to protect your person. They said they believed you would eventually hurt them again. They said too much had already happened between the two of you. But your person was no longer willing to accept excuses disguised as concern. They looked directly at them and said, "You didn't protect me. You decided my future for me." That sentence changed the entire room. Because the person responsible finally understood that the lie had completely lost its power. And then the full truth came out. They admitted they knew you had not completely moved on. They knew there were still feelings on both sides. They knew you had tried to get answers. But they were afraid that if your person returned to you, everything they had planned would change. So they interfered. They discouraged every attempt at contact. They twisted your words. They made your silence look like rejection. And whenever your person started questioning the story, they gave them another reason to stay away. Your person listened without interrupting. But inside, their heart was breaking. Because every confession represented another moment that had been stolen from the two of you. Another conversation that should have happened. Another chance that disappeared because somebody else believed they knew what was best. Then your person asked the question that mattered most. Did they ever actually say they wanted me gone forever? The answer was no. That single word hit harder than everything else. No. You never said it. You never gave that final rejection. You never closed the door in the way they had been told. And your person finally understood that they had spent all this time grieving something that may never have truly ended. They left that room without saying another word. There was nothing left to discuss. The truth had finally been exposed. But exposing the lie was only the beginning. Because now your person had to decide what they were going to do with the truth. For the first time, fear was no longer controlling their decision. Other people's opinions were no longer controlling it either. They knew exactly who they needed to speak to. You. They sat alone and began writing a message again. This time, they did not delete it. They did not ask anyone what they should say. They did not show it to a friend. They simply wrote from the heart. They admitted that they had believed something about you that was never true. They admitted they should have come directly to you. They admitted there were countless moments when they wanted to reach out but stopped themselves because they thought you had already chosen another future. And then they wrote the sentence they had been afraid to admit for far too long. I never stopped caring. I just thought you wanted me to disappear. My child, imagine carrying those words inside your heart for so long. Imagine believing love was over when the real problem was never the love. It was the lie between you. Your person now sees the entire story differently. They no longer see you as the one who abandoned them. They see two people who were separated by fear, silence, interference, and information that should never have been trusted. And that realization has awakened something they thought they had buried forever. Hope. Not blind hope. Not fantasy. The hope that comes when hidden facts finally make sense. They know they cannot erase the past. They cannot recover every lost day. They cannot pretend the pain never happened. But they can stop allowing the lie to control what happens next. And that is exactly what they intend to do. They are ready to hear your side. Not someone else's version of it. Not a rumor. Not an assumption. Your truth. They want to know what you actually felt when they disappeared. They want to know whether you ever waited for them. They want to know whether there were nights when you also wondered why they never came back. Most of all, they want to know whether there is still something between you worth saving. Because the person who tried to keep you apart has lost the one thing they depended on most. Secrecy. The truth is out now. The story has changed. And your person can finally see that the distance between you was never proof that the love was gone. Sometimes distance is created because two people are both waiting for the other one to speak. Sometimes silence survives because somebody benefits from keeping it alive. But once the truth enters the room, silence becomes much harder to maintain. Your person is no longer running from what they feel. They are no longer letting another voice define you. And whether the next conversation brings reconciliation, closure, or a completely new beginning, one thing is certain now. The decision will finally belong to the two people it should have belonged to from the beginning. You and them. The lie kept you apart. The truth has finally destroyed it. And now, for the first time in a very long time, nothing is standing between your person and the conversation they should have had with you all along.